So dobrý večer, good evening. My name is Czesław, I'm the head of the Czech Center. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening. We still have a few more people on the way. Nevertheless, I think we're gonna kick off with my very brief introductions of the series. So after the last year, I know that perhaps some of you might have joined us already last year. So after the successful launch of the Women in Focus series last year, about the inspirational women personalities from various fields. I think last year we covered architecture, art, sport, ballet. So I'm very pleased that we have decided to continue with the series also in this year Czech Center's programming. And I'm truly excited that this year lineup will bring guests with very enriching and inspirational professional as well as personal experiences. And this evening we will explore with our guest Ivana Kottasová the world of journalism and international news reporting. So let me briefly introduce Ivana. She's a senior producer at the CNN International, covering international news, war conflicts and human rights, focusing on Europe, Middle East and Africa. Most recently, Ivana traveled to Israel and the West Bank to report on the October 7th terror attack by Hamas and the subsequent ground invasion by Israel Defense Forces in Gaza. Also in 2022, Ivana covered the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the Battle of Kyiv. And for her CNN team reporting, she was awarded, among others, a duPont-Columbia Award, a Foreign Press Association Award, and an Emmy. So let me just say that she's also a graduate of the Columbia University in New York, majoring in journalism, and LSE here in London in government affairs. And I might also add that Ivana is a vivid runner, if I may say, and a supporter of Zatopek Charity Fund, which we are organizing on an annual basis here at the Czech Center. So this evening will be divided in three different parts. We'll start with the opening remarks by Ivana. The second part will be followed by a dialogue discussion with Ivan Kitka. Ivan, he is a freelance journalist who regularly contributes to British and Czech media. And the third part will be open for Q&A, as you so have your questions ready. So with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Ivana here.
Thank you very much, Jimik. I have to say I'm quite disturbed by the size of my head. So I have to say I'm quite humbled by the idea that people would come and listen to me speak. So thank you very much for coming. If you came for the free drinks, that's fine too. In fact, you might actually enjoy this a bit more if you had one. I think they're behind the corner. So please do not hesitate to drink. In fact, I agreed to do this talk while drinking upstairs at the Christmas party at the Czech Embassy. So it would be a nice continuation of the theme. Thank you for that introduction. I almost didn't recognize myself. It sounded quite dull. I will talk a little bit about myself and how I got into journalism. That part of the talk is going to be very short. And then I'm going to talk about some of the stories that I've had the privilege to do and report on. I've picked some that I find interesting, some that I think are quite important, and also a couple that I'm simply just very proud of having done. So, how I got into journalism. I am afraid I'm one of those very boring people who sort of always knew what they wanted to do. I think I was about 14, 15 when I decided I wanted to be a journalist. The reason was I was very interested in news and international affairs. I was a fairly good writer in Czech, so it seemed like a good idea. I also really liked telling people things they didn't know, so I guess you can call me a bit of a gossip girl, maybe, you know, being someone very annoying, saying, but did you know that? But, you know, it seemed like a good choice. I, however, encountered a major issue, which was I had absolutely no idea how to do that. I didn't know anyone who was doing anything remotely connected to journalism or anything in that field. Most people in my family are in the fields of natural sciences. Both of my parents are mathematicians, so when I went to them, or when I first told them I wanted to be a journalist, my mom looked at me slightly alarmed and said something like, but don't you want to do something real? No, so it just seemed to me as this pie in the sky idea that I'd really like to be a journalist, but it's not going to happen because it's crazy. The Czech media market is very small. There's a couple of newspapers, the Czech TV, which, you know, the best job at the Czech TV at that time was taken by Ivan. So I was like, I can't do that. But I would really like to be in a position to tell you that my career today is a result of hard work and years of sacrifices, but I think that would be incredibly dishonest because I've actually been just very, very lucky in very many ways. So my first major luck is actually my parents. My parents who, once they sort of realized that I was serious about this journalism thing, they supported me all the way through and were extremely supportive. And I have to say, I think that is actually a sign of major love, parental love, when you support your children in their choices, even though the choices do not really align with what you thought they would do. Because my parents really thought, you know, I have two sisters, I believe they thought at least one of us is going to be a mathematician. Didn't happen, but they always supported us in whatever we decided to do. So, you know, that is amazing. So that is my major luck and privilege, because they made it possible for me to go into journalism. And as I said, I didn't know anything about how to do it. It seemed completely impossible, and this is where another luck came in my way. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who was quite a character. I have many funny stories about him, which I can tell you later when we drink the lovely wine that's served outside. But one thing he did was that when I had a conversation with him about what I want to do, and I said, well, I'd like to be a journalist, but I don't think it's possible, he just looked at me and said, why not? And I think that was the moment when I started to think, well, actually, why not? And I made a plan, and the plan was, I'm going to study journalism, how to get to journalism, and take it from there. And my parents were very supportive of that, and it so happened that I decided to come and study in England. And again, they were extremely helpful and extremely supportive. So I studied journalism in England. My first year was hard. I think I was a bit lonely, maybe a bit homesick. I don't know if I can see some students here. You know, I didn't quite fit in the whole freshers week, let's drink 20 Jello shots and dress like a penguin and go around the city. It wasn't, the first year was hard. I did well in school, but I didn't quite feel like I fit in. So after my first year, I did internship in the Czech Republic, and that internship turned into a job that I took, and I took a gap year. And again, massively lucky moment. That job was my first job in journalism, and it was in a Czech newspaper called Hospodářské noviny. And at that time, that particular time, that newsroom was absolutely bursting with talent. So some of the best journalists in the Czech Republic who were at their very best at that time were working in the paper, and I had the privilege to work with them. Nevertheless, I decided I wanted to go back to university. I went back, I studied a bit more. As was said, I went to New York to do a graduate school in journalism at Columbia, and I went to London School of Economics to do a degree in European politics. And in that last year, there's a laugh, it was before Brexit. It was so funny because actually in most of our seminars, Brexit was discussed as this completely, the concept of it was just so surreal. So this was 2011, 2012. Well, we know what happened. But in that last year at LSE, I was applying for all these jobs, and I just kept getting rejected from every single one of them. And sometimes I didn't hear at all, which is not great. Sometimes I got a phone call saying, "You were amazing, you were so great, we loved you, but someone else was better, so you were the runner-up." So I applied at the end for 33 jobs and was rejected from every single one of them. And then I applied for an internship at CNN, and I got a phone call saying, "You were amazing, we loved you, but there was someone else we liked more, so you were the runner-up." And here comes the plot twist, the lucky moment. That person got a job in The Guardian, so didn't take the internship, so it went to me, and the rest is history. I've been there for 11 years, 12, coming 12. So to sum this all up, I think my main career advice for any future journalists here in the audience is make sure you pick the right parents, be lucky, and don't give up. So that's about it. Now, much more interesting are, I want to show you some stories that I've done while at CNN. This works, yes. I picked this assignment because it was one of my first big assignments in terms of going to a place abroad that was in a massive crisis, and I landed there at a time when it was all unfolding, and the assignment was find stories. And it was in this assignment during the Greek crisis when I realized the sort of journalism I wanted to do, the sort of reporting I was most interested in, which is looking at how these big crises, geopolitical crises, economic crises, big systemic changes and big policy decisions, how they impact people, normal people. So the Eurozone crisis was largely unfolding in Brussels. I don't know if you remember, Yanis Varoufakis negotiating with Angela Merkel, all these summits that just went on and on and on. Then there was a referendum, and I was in Greece, and I was just trying to make sense of what that crisis looks like on the ground. So I did a story about homeless people in Athens, which really stuck with me because we met. There was one man who used to be a professor at the university in Athens, and he lost his job in one of the cuts. There are a series of public sector cuts. He lost his job as a result of that, and then 2 years later, through gradual descent, he ended up being homeless in Athens. And I remember the social worker who is on that picture was telling me how, by the way, that is not the professor, it's another person. She was telling me that they know who these people are because they tend to stick to certain locations, and they come and visit them every now and then and ask them what they need. Do you need medication? Do you need water? Do you need extra layers? And he said, I really need some books. Can you please get me some books, because I really miss reading. And I was just, that story was just, to me, such a good illustration of what that Eurozone crisis did to people and how the public life in Greece changed because of that. So that was Greece. Next, I was lucky enough to be able to take part in CNN's project called As Equals, which is a long-running project that is focused on women's rights and gender inequality. And I went to Tanzania to do 2 stories One of them was a story about a law that they had in Tanzania, which essentially meant that if a girl who is in school gets pregnant, she gets kicked out and cannot come back after giving birth. And it didn't matter whether the pregnancy was a result of a relationship or whether it was a child bride situation or whether it was a result of a rape. Whatever happened, if you get pregnant, you're done. So we did this story about girls in different situations who had that experience, and I don't want to say that our story caused the law to change, because that's not true, but definitely the law eventually did change, and I think the fact that media, including us, paid attention to it hopefully helped it a little bit. Another story which I'm extremely proud of was a story about, also from Tanzania, about period poverty. We did a big report about girls who don't have access to sanitary products. I'm checking the time just to see I'm not running past. And they're missing on school. They don't go to school when they're on their period. And to illustrate the impact of that, we built a interactive calculator where people could put in, how long their period takes or how often they are on their period, and it calculated how much time of their life they would miss if they didn't have access to sanitary products. There was an option of, I'm a man, I have no clue, give me the average, and it gave you the average. But why I'm so proud about it, because on that day, CNN website, which is the biggest news website in the world, as we like to say, the main story was a story about periods, and I just thought, amazing. Unfortunately, not much has changed since then. Pandemic, a story that was obviously the biggest story of in the world at that time. Again, I tried to, with stories like this, what often happens is they are so big, and the numbers of people impacted are so huge that it starts being sort of this concept that we cannot understand. And I think this is true with the pandemic, it's true with any kind of earthquake or natural disaster that has high casualty numbers. It's true with any war, any conflict. We start thinking about people as numbers and we lose the touch. So it was important to me to do stories again about people. What was strange about this story was that we all lived it, right? Normally when I cover a story, I am an outside observer. We go somewhere where things are happening to other people, and we speak to the other people and we tell their stories. With the pandemic, we were reporting on lockdown, and we were in lockdown. We were reporting on not being able to get vaccination. We were not able to get vaccination, and all these things. I think that was a very interesting experience for all of us journalists, because we had to deal with the story as it was unfolding while also reporting on it. Climate crisis, definitely the biggest story of our lifetime. If we don't do something about this, there is not going to be much future. So this was a story that we did sort of towards the end of the first year of the pandemic, and we wanted to look at how all this public money was floating into the economy. So there was a lot of talk about fiscal stimulus because the pandemic really crushed the economy. So governments around the world were trying to find ways to encourage growth. And one of the ways was there was a lot of investment into infrastructure projects, and unfortunately a lot of them were into projects that involved fossil fuels. So we did stories about that. But we wanted to look at it from slightly different angles. So what we did was we went to 4 different communities which rely on fossil fuels for living. So we were trying to sort of tell the story from the point of the people whose livelihoods depend on fossil fuels, which we all know will have to end if we want to survive, and how governments are trying to, either help them transition or are pumping money into the industries to keep them going, even though their future is probably limited. It was very interesting in reporting. So I'm not explaining it very well, but I care deeply about the climate crisis, and this was one way we tried to bring the big topic to life by examining what it does to communities. Another one, extremely cold assignment, went to Iceland and reported on this very strange phenomena that they have in Iceland, where sea levels are actually dropping. So what happens is, because you have all these glaciers and they're pushing down the ground, if there is warmer weather, these glaciers start melting, they stop pushing down the ground bounces back, sea level drops, relative sea level drops, ships have problems getting into ports, there's a lot of different problems that arise from it. So we went to Iceland and spoke to fishing communities that are having to completely rethink their way of living, because they can't do what they've been doing because of climate crisis, but in a very different way than we are used to hearing about climate crisis and sea level change. This was a heartbreaking story, and one that I'm extremely proud of doing. It's a story of postpartum depression, which is a very sort of ignored condition that affects a large number of women. Pranaya was a mom who took her own life and the life of her son because of postpartum depression. I've met her husband, who the reason why we found out about the story was actually through running. He to raise awareness and money for a foundation that helps people who suffer from postpartum depression. He ran the length of Britain, so he started up in Scotland and went all the way down to the south. And we had the story was difficult to report because it's so tragic and so personal. So it took a long time to put it together in a way that we were happy about it. But if there is ever a story that where I felt like it is making some kind of difference, it was this one, because I received incredible number of emails afterwards saying, I recognize this story, I'm a husband of someone who suffered, or I suffered myself and I didn't want to tell anyone. So really, really glad that we got to do this story. Ukraine, I think I'm running out of time a little bit, but please bear with me. Ukraine, this was 2022. In late 2021, we started, being concerned about what is happening in Ukraine. And towards the end of the year, I told my bosses that if we were going to send someone, I'd like to go to Ukraine. So they did send me in mid-February, so about 10, 11 days before the invasion. And it was very strange time to be in Ukraine because all of the journalists were coming in. It was impossible to get a flight. It was, we were sort of trying to figure out what's going on. And yet all the Ukrainians seemed completely fine. They, when you talk to them, they would tell you, well, we've been living in a war since 2014. This is not a new thing for us. Of course, at that point, we didn't know what's going to happen. So we were sort of waiting what's going to happen. Every day there was more and more threatening language from the Kremlin. And then on the 24th of February at about 4 a.m. in the morning, President Putin came up on screen and said that he is launching his special military operation, which we all know is a war. So we were sat in our little workspace in the hotel in Kyiv. We listened to the speech, and then about 30 minutes later we started hearing explosions. And at that point, I think that was the moment when we all realized, okay, this is actually happening. Because until then, no one really knew what was going to happen. Intelligence was coming in, but intelligence can be wrong. I'm not sure whether we expected what happened. And why I picked this story is I wanted to show you how in the moment of big breaking news, the journalism sort of goes back into the very basics. So we didn't know what's happening. He said something on air, but there are explosions. So we basically just reported what we saw and heard. This is a message I sent to my colleagues. We're hearing bangs was my master stroke of reporting. Great insight in there. And this report translates into this. So someone in London took my reporting and CNN teams hear loud explosions, blasts are being heard, etc., etc. So back to basic, but as I said, very quickly, when you report on these big stories, they become so big that it's very difficult to pick the human parts of it. So that's why I think CNN is so amazing, because, and I'm not paid to say it here, I actually mean it, because we go there to these places when the big stuff is happening, but we stay there and we come back in 6 months and in a year and 2 years. So this was a trip that I did last year around the anniversary, and I wanted to do again something about how the war is impacting normal people, if there is such a thing as normal people. And this was one of the most amazing assignments I ever had, because I was traveling around Ukraine speaking to babushkas. If you've ever met Ukrainian babushka, you know there's always pancakes, there's always tea, coffee, they're so welcoming. But these women, so we spoke to all these older women about their lives, and we had Holocaust survivors who were suddenly under invasion again. We had women who were evacuated from the east in 2014 and then again in 2022. It was just fascinating. Another story was the story we did about people with intellectual disabilities and how the war impacts them. So, again, vulnerable community that maybe is not naturally visible to the outside world. I'm going to wrap up soon, I promise. Israel, again, a horrendous story that very, it's a terror and horrific story of such proportions that it's very difficult to understand the scale of it if you just talk about the numbers. So we tried to speak to people who were there and went through it to kind of humanize it a little bit and really show what it was like to go through that terrible terrorist attack. And of course then after Israel started responding to the attack, the story largely shifted and the attention is now much more on Gaza. So again, these are just some headlines that we've done where, again, we're trying to make it a little bit more personal, because I think the latest death toll that's been reported is 26,000, and it's just such a large number that it's very difficult to imagine what it looks like. And the last story I want to mention is one of the hardest stories I ever did, the Prague shooting. I was in the Czech Republic when it unfolded, and I've, in the past few years, I've traveled to places where people are doing horrible things to each other, but they never actually happened in my home. This was very close to my heart. The school is at the center of public life in the Czech Republic. I have many friends who either went there, some of them teach there, or have some sort of links. So reporting on something that really impacts you is just whole another challenge. We can talk about it later, but yeah, I think that's probably all I have. Here's back to my big head of the screen. So thank you for listening to me. I hope I wasn't too... I put a timer on, and then my phone locked, so I couldn't see it, but I can see now that it's 26 minutes, so hopefully right, I can catch my breath now.
Thank you, Ivana, for really thrilling and fantastic introduction. I have to say I feel almost guilty stepping in and interrupting you because it was so fascinating to listen to my former competition, I have to admit.
I would like to point out that you were the person on screen that I was watching when I was deciding to be a journalist.
Oh,
so
thank you so
I remember you reporting live on Charles's divorce.
That's
That's the first story I remember you doing.
well, good thing is it wasn't on my own divorce. Maybe we should, before going back to your hotspots and places you visited, you reported on, we should go back for some time to the topic of this chat, to these talks, the women in focus. Tell us, how is it being a woman in a large news organization, big American corporation? Because when I was preparing for this talk, I went through the list of Czech public television, Czech public radio, foreign correspondents or personalities. There is not a single woman at the moment being abroad as a reporter, as a journalist. So how is it at CNN?
We have women. in fact, I am so grateful and so proud of CNN and how we women are, what roles we're playing. So our chief international correspondent is a woman, our Clarissa Ward, Christiana Ampur, of course, our chief international anchor. The head of the London newsroom is a woman. I have 6 bosses between me and the CEO, and 3 are women, 3 are men. So there are women. Our CEO is a man and has always been a man. So there is definitely stuff we can improve. But I think these things are changing very quickly. Even the 12 years or 11 years that I've been with CNN, I see massive change in how we think about this. So just to give you a very small example, CNN has very good maternity and paternity leave policies, partly because it is proven
more than
that
7 months for
a year.
a year.
And for men, it's the paternity is 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So because the research shows that if you have good paternity leave policies, gender pay gaps get smaller because men also share the load of childcare. So that's, and that came from conversations about how we can have more women in the newsroom. The fact that there aren't many in the Czech Republic, I don't understand this because there are great women journalists in the Czech Republic. They're just not getting there.
Just talking about the presenters, I remember the BBC, when I worked for the BBC, there were constant discussions about the pay gaps between the top presenters. Always women were several hundred thousand less paid annually than their male colleagues. How is it at the BBC, if you know, obviously?
I don't know. So the reason why we know this is because BBC, being public broadcaster, they have to release the top paid people. I don't have those numbers. I am confident that people who are in the same jobs are paid same salaries. What happens in journalism generally, not just at CNN, is that there are roles that are more likely to be done by men and roles that are more likely to be done by women, and oftentimes the roles traditionally done by men are better paid. So that's why I say we have work to do. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm very happy with the way CNN is looking at this, because there is work being done and there is work done.
Yeah. Also, maybe we should mention that actually for my generation, CNN was mostly a television channel, then a digital television channel. But for current generation, it's also a huge internet presence, and you are part of the CNN digital website.
Yeah.
Did you ever have an ambition to cross the fence and to become a big Czech origin?
So I have to say that I've done some TV bits and pieces, and I really did not enjoy it very much. I don't think I'm very good at it.
Based on your talk tonight,
I don't have the. Ivan will be very, very humble about this, but it's extremely. The skill of doing on-air live reporting is a real skill that you have to perfect, and I don't have it, and I don't necessarily feel like I want to do it. I am a writer. I prefer writing. I've always done writing, and I enjoy writing. But I also know that I ponder on every sentence and I rewrite it several times. You cannot do that in live reports on television. And we talked about it before in the green room. I said I have this terrible thing about if it's quiet, I feel like I have to fill the space with something, even if it's nonsense. I don't want, I can do it here when there is about 30 of you. The idea that millions of people are watching me doing it, no, thank you.
Well, yeah.
So I don't think I will be a TV reporter anytime soon.
Okay, if we can come back for a while to one of your last assignments in Prague. You mentioned you were in Prague at the time of the mass shooting incident. Actually, your voice at least, or was on CNN Live at the time, so there was at least some of your presence on television screen. Then, if I remember well and if I understood it well, there was quite a lot of discussions in Prague about the ethics, journalistic ethics, how to cover a story like this, whether to show the actual shooter on a television screen, whether to publish his photographs, whether to name the victims, or at what stage we should name the victims. Tell me what's the CNN approach to these ethical issues and how you personally maybe were dealing with them.
I think that's a really interesting question, and unfortunately CNN is very used to covering these events because they happen a lot in the US. We don't have set rules on this. I think you have to sort of adapt your rules to each situation. So when it happened in the Czech Republic, where it does never happens, we will treat it differently because it's a slightly different story than when it happens in the US, where it's such a regular occurrence that there is almost a set timeline of it happens, then there's memorial, then there is politicians talking, all that. So with naming the suspect, we sometimes name them, sometimes don't. In this particular occasions, we didn't name him because the Czech authorities asked us journalists not to. And if the authorities advise us not to name them, unless there is a very, very good journalistic reason to overrule them, we wouldn't necessarily.
Did you feel personally being censored?
No. Because I knew we can publish it. And we had a conversation because the name was out there. And we sort of, the argument always is, does the publishing of the name add any value journalistically to the story? I felt like in this case it didn't. So we didn't. And major reason was because the authorities asked us not to. when it comes to the victims, I think you always need to, the worst possible thing I think that can happen to anyone is finding out that something happened to their loved ones from the media. So our role would be, we make sure that we are not the ones breaking the news to the loved ones. So we tend to wait for authorities to release the names. In this case, it didn't happen because the families didn't want it. I personally feel that in tragic events like this, the focus should be on the victims, and the victims that were named and where we knew something about that, we wanted to, tell people about these lovely people who were so horrifically murdered. I don't know if you know the story, but very large number of the victims were students of languages and deaf and communication with the deaf. So these are people who decide to dedicate their life to helping people who are hard of hearing or deaf. So by definition, these people were lovely, lovely people. They were scout girl and volunteer firefighter and a church-going girl, and it's. I feel like it would be great to be able to show the world how unfair this was and how great these people were. If their families don't want to do that because it pains them more to do it, we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, maybe we just need, as journalists or as editors, some time to actually digest the whole event and come with it a bit later in a documentary or something.
Absolutely, yeah. The emotions are running high.
Yeah. You also talked about visiting some of the real dangerous hotspots of international conflicts in the last 2 years. I remember from my years with the BBC News, we went through really tough trainings and health and safety arrangements before even almost leaving the BBC headquarters, BBC buildings. How is CNN?
It's same. You cannot go unless you go through this hostile environment course, as we call it. I completely failed at it.
In what sense?
In what sense? So it's they take it very holistically. So there's all these. You sit in the classroom for part of it, where you learn first aid and things about what kind of weapon does what kind of damage and how to seek. Where to hide when there is a grenade, where there is a machine gun, all these very, very practical things. And then they put you out in the woods. In my case, it was somewhere in Surrey, and you do practical exercises. So, first thing was they put us in a scenario where they sort of led us behind a corner, and there was a fake car crash with victims. The blood was squirting from them, and we were meant to give them first aid. And I rushed in and started using the tourniquet because we just had the lesson on the first aid, and I knew how to do it. And we did all of that, and the instructor goes, "Stop!" And he points at me and is like, "You're dead." I'm like, "What?" Like, you stepped on a landmine right here in the very first second of your engagement in this. The lesson of that course being always be aware of your surrounding. So that was one failure. I did not imagine ever needing this. And this is going back to Ukraine. I didn't go to Ukraine because I wanted to go to a war zone and be a war zone correspondent. I don't think of myself as a war reporter. I went to Ukraine because I was interested in the Ukrainian story and in what was happening, and suddenly there was a war around me. So I did have the training, and I do now look around to see if there's any landmines. But it wasn't something that I was going for deliberately.
Sure. Going to places like Gaza or border between Israel and Gaza, going to Ukraine, were there any moments where you really felt being in danger, or were you scared, almost not able to do your job?
Of course, it's scary when things are happening around you, when there is strikes and you have to run into the bunker or something like that. But at that moment you almost are sort of laser focused on what you're doing. And working for CNN is incredible privilege because I have incredibly efficient and great support system around me. So when we go into these places, we always go with our security producers, experts who do risk assessments, who are there with us, so that when something starts happening, I don't have to think about it because I just follow them. So they are, sometimes as journalism, you will know this, we kind of get into this tunnel vision, following the story and not paying attention to what's happening around us. Case in point was me trying to save that man's leg when there were landmines and I stepped in it even though it was an exercise. These people are in place so that we can do that, we can have that tunnel vision and follow the story in a safe way. And if we are in danger, they remove us or they advise us. They never tell us they never tell us you can't do this. They work with us to figure out how we can do it. And if it's really bad idea, they say, I think this is a really bad idea, and I trust them completely. I trust them 100%.
Just one last question before I hand over to the audience. Fake news, post-truths, half-truths. How do you personally protect yourself, and how CNN is protecting the organization against, misreporting, misquoting at the age of social media when our audience is quite often fast at reporting something than us?
Yes, so number one rule is don't rush, and if we have to wait and we won't be first reporting it, it's worth it just so we're not wrong. So we'd rather be accurate than fast. And the
ABC rule number one.
No, yes, it's number one rule of journalism, because you make mistakes when you're in rush, when you're in adrenaline and all that. I think there's two things that we need to distinguish. There is errors and misquotings and things like that where we make a mistake and we report something that's not true or our policy is always admit that and tell our readers we made a mistake and this is the mistake and we corrected it. Sometimes we even say why we made the mistake and how it came to be. And that is because our reputation and the trust is the only thing we have. So if we mess it up, we have to be open with our readers. That's one thing. So everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes and we correct them. Then there is the fake news and the disinformation, and there is so much of it. And you will know this. The Russian disinformation scene, specifically towards news about Ukraine, but also the Czech Republic. I mean, look at what happened yesterday in the Czech Senate. The Istanbul Convention was rejected, and one major reason for that was disinformation and stuff that is not true floating around and influencing people who have power. So I think the way to combat this is just to really focus on reporting facts and maintain that trust at whatever cost. So we have to. If we make a mistake, we have to admit it, but we try not to make mistakes so that when there is a question of whether something is true or not, whether something is a misinformation, people know that they can turn to CNN and trust us.
My question is about AI. Actually, I have two kind of practical questions. First, are you allowed at all to use AI when it comes to like breaking stories, when you need to write something fast? Like, are some of the articles written?
No.
Not at all. You can, and journalists are not even trained to like.
I think we are all figuring all of this out, and I am assuming that we are getting to a point where we will be using these tools, all of us, in some way or another. We don't know how to use them effectively yet. I know that obviously there are talks. Probably there are talks somewhere about how we use them, but as of now, I don't use these tools and we are not using them.
Mm-hmm.
But whether that will change, I don't know. I mean, they could be quite useful. You know, we use spell check, and that's fine. So I don't know is the answer. But as of now, we don't.
And when you work on videos, so there is a story, and then I see many times in CNN you have also video. So do you like collaborate with the videographer, and do you, for instance, write the words for the video, or is it sort of like a mix, or completely separate?
It depends. So my main job is being a writer. So I mostly write the articles. There are trips that I've done, for instance, the Iceland trip that I showed you, or the 2 Tanzania trips, where I was with a videographer, so I was focusing on the print content and she was shooting videos, and we collaborated, of course, on both. It's all very collaborative, especially when we go to places, because you travel together, but we all do slightly different things, because doing if you're a live reporter on television, you tend to be the situation that you are somewhere and you're doing live, as we call them, live hits every hour or so, whereas I need to be running around a little bit more, speaking to people and gathering more material, because I need a bit more than just a sound bite. And they need the pictures, I don't necessarily need the pictures. So we work together, but we all have our own jobs that we need to focus on. So it's very collaborative. It's great teamwork on this.
Thank you.
I just may add, sorry, there is another one in the queue. Just a quick follow-up to this question. How much pressure do you feel to bring, exclusive stories, exclusive sources? Because in these days, with so many digital reporting, it's really difficult to find somebody unique, somebody not who doesn't appear on BBC or other television channels. Do you feel like it's a daily pressure to come with something really original nobody else in the media environment comes with?
I'd say it depends. When we do the breaking news situations, that is very straightforward, and it's kind of, we just focus on reporting the facts. When it comes to features and things like that, the pressure is on delivering stories or coming up with angles and characters and different ways of storytelling that are original, because we don't want to report we don't want to do stories that others have done, because people would have read them already. So we want to bring them something new. So yes, it's not a constant pressure, but of course I myself don't want to do stories other people have done.
Another question there.
Yes, I actually have a follow-up on this one. So when you mentioned that you want to take time before there is perhaps a misinformation confirmed or denied, so I went to this journalistic workshop way before, when I was deciding which career path I wanted to take. And what really
be a journalist.
I'm working in a similar field, but not entirely. What really scared me was that they said that you have to be the first one out there to put it, just to gain advantages in front of others. So how would you say, do you still feel this pressure to be the first one to publish the story?
We absolutely want to be the first. We absolutely want to break all the news and beat everybody else. We don't want to do it at the cost of being wrong. So that's where you have to hold your horses. When the story is straightforward, we go out as quickly as we can, and it's you would see literally people running through the newsroom to be in front of the camera, and you will see all of us in the digital trying to make that wheel of death that is spinning on your website when it's not loading, and be first. So yes, there is pressure, especially now when you have your phone and you have all these push notifications, and it pops up, and you want to go to the first one that comes, right? So absolutely want to be first, and we often are. Top.
And a second question, if I can, a little unrelated to the follow-up. It's about how you translate your Czech heritage to your work. Is it sometimes an advantage, but sometimes maybe a disadvantage?
It took me a really long time to realize it's not a disadvantage, but it's advantage. I spent a long time trying to be as, come across as British as possible when I was applying for jobs and try to really blend in, because I felt like that was my best shot at getting a job, because why would they want to hire a foreigner? I work for an organization that wants foreigners. So in our newsroom we have incredible number of people from different countries. I am currently, as far as I know, I'm currently the only Czech working at CNN, which has advantages and disadvantages. Oftentimes my colleagues would come to me and ask me to translate something, and I panic, especially in relation to statements made by our former president. That was what happened now. So default is, if there is something in Czech Republic or Slovakia, they go to me. I had the pleasure of translating Robert Fico's remarks this week, which was again fascinating. But it is an advantage because I understand the region. I understand. I can put something. I can see things others may not see. And we want to be a global news organization. We want people around the world to watch us. So we need to understand all those people. And if I can help people understand the Czech Republic and bring my point of view to stories about Eastern Europe, then great, it's an advantage. Yeah. But I didn't realize it to start with.
Incidentally, you've got the CNN Prima in Czech language. Any comments or observation on the channel?
I'm afraid it's way above my pay grade to comment on these relationships.
Okay. If I'm not wrong, we've got only ladies' questions tonight because we are focused on women. Any? Oh,
I can balance it up a little bit and gender balance. So my question is about reporting, because we know that the news cycle moves very fast and events are being overtaken by other events and superseded by something else, and as journalists we kind of lose interest and move on to report on something else. But did you have any instances when you had to revisit any places or people you reported in the past and kind of come back to their stories or just see what has changed and what has...
Ukraine is a good example of that. I don't know if you remember, on the day when the invasion started, there was this lovely story that we were at, because our hotel was literally across the little square in Kyiv, where this couple decided to get married. They're like, oh my god, Russia is invading our countries, let's go get married. And they had this improvised wedding in central Kyiv, and it was just really touching moment. And the video sort of went viral, and people were sharing it a lot. And last year for the anniversary, I went to see them and talk about their first year as married couple. So that was a great example of this. We often go back to people to check in on them and how they're doing, and see, even if it doesn't turn into a story, it's good to keep these relationships. So I'm going back to Ukraine hopefully soon, so I hope to see these guys again, because it will be interesting to see how they're doing.
Another balancing?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for coming to talk to us tonight, and congratulations on a very lucid delivery in the language, which is admittedly not your own, so well done, not your native tongue, so thank you. I have a more sort of mundane personal interest or question. You mentioned you have two parents who are mathematicians and two sisters. You didn't say either of your sisters journalists, or were they gone into completely
No. So the longer version of the story is my mom saying, don't you want to do something real? Me asking, what does she mean by this? And her offering three options. You can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, or you can be a mathematician. I have two sisters, one of them is a lawyer. So, take very good. The other one is a teacher, also incredibly useful and fantastic occupation. So thankfully we ticked at least one of those boxes, but none of us is mathematicians, unfortunately.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for one or two more questions, if anybody is curious.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, there's one.
Follow-ups are extremely important. That's one of the top lessons in journalism.
Oh, you see, this is good. So when you talked about Czech heritage, I was interested in how you expanded onto Slovakia and then Eastern Europe. So why did you choose to be the first one to travel to Ukraine? Does it also relate to the heritage?
Absolutely.
And then, conversely, like living in the UK after Brexit, and with so much media buzz about Central Eastern Europeans here, or Eastern Europeans, the Polish and Romanian who steal our jobs. So how did you cope with that?
The day of the Brexit vote, not the day of the vote, the day of the result was my birthday, and I remember feeling, I was extremely tired because we were working throughout the night. Back then I was on the business desk, so I remember around the vote, the polls close at 10. Then they start counting. I always go to the LSE for their election night party. If you ever have a chance, every time there's a general election, LSE has a fantastic party where they have panels of experts commenting live on the results. So I think I did that to get some quotes and insights. Then I went back into the newsroom, and around 3-4 a.m. the pound graph on my screen started going like this, and people starting to look very serious. And I remember thinking, whoa, I mean, you have to take it personally when the campaign was so focused on Eastern Europeans. But I don't have that experience in my life. I live in London. I've always felt welcome. I have fantastic friends. I think for anyone that was a hard moment. But again, at that time at that moment I was a journalist, and I was simply reporting on what's happening. And whatever I thought happened sort of hours and hours later, when I was like, whoa, what is this going to mean for us? Do I want to leave? Do I want to stay here? That is, when you're on the job, you just push that aside, and you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the story.
Yes. Is there another one? I just wanted to comment on this one very briefly, that I came to London as one of the first journalists from free Czechoslovakia at the time, 1991, on a 3-year contract, which became 33 years contract this year. And I never experienced anything, any injustice, any bad comments on me coming from Central Europe or Eastern Europe. Quite opposite, anywhere I went to the BBC, I felt that the Brits particularly, or any other foreigners, felt, sort of excited having anybody from Václav Havel's country, from a country who gave Europe, Central Europe, the world, Václav Čapek, Robot, and the other words. And I think it's partly thanks to Czech Center and other institutions on the Czech side who are trying to promote the Czech Republic and Czech culture, that perception of Czech Republic to me personally is really very good. I can't complain at all. Otherwise I wouldn't stay 33 years, obviously.
Oh, perhaps Ivan, with your last comments, that we should leave it there. It's very nice. But
I think there was one more question there.
But if I might have, I know the last one question, so maybe before last questions. It would be more looking in the future. I think before the talk we have discussed how the news reporting really has changed over the last, looking at 3 decades, because the CNN effect in early 90s during the first Persian Gulf War, if you remember, the CNN taking and showing the war really live around the globe, and it set a new standard. The standard really has changed a lot and evolved over the last 30 years. today you do 24/7, reporting. People are looking at the digital devices wherever they are. So my question is, how do you see the news reporting evolving maybe over the next 10 years with all the AI and the digital technology? What's ahead of us?
Let me pull out my crystal ball and answer. On the CNN effect and the war, by the way, a superstar producer who was there and is still with us, was with us in Ukraine and most recently Israel, Ingrid Formanek of Slovak origin, fantastic woman, and she could probably answer this question much better than I do. How is it going to change? I think AI will probably start playing a big role. I don't know what that will look like. I think we're still figuring it out. We definitely need to, we are, I would say, the way reporting as such has not changed. The basic skills of reporting, the basics of reporting facts, taking your time, going to places, speaking to people, and telling their stories, that has not changed. What has changed is the formats that we use, the way people consume news, and we have to meet them where they are. So, it's all very nice that we want to, print newspapers and have a daily news bulletin at 7 p.m. that we expect everybody to stop doing whatever they're doing and sit down and watch television. But it's not. If it's not happening, if people are not doing that, we need to find where they are and where they want to read the news and find them there. So, digital is a great spot for that. People are on their mobile phones constantly. Social media, with all of their negatives and all of the controversies, are a major way people consume news. So we have work to do there. I think it's just going to be more different formats, different platforms. We'll have to start thinking about where people go for the news and adopt.
Very good. Thank you. We have the last one.
There was one.
I'm giving a lot of practical questions, but I was wondering, when it comes to features like the one you did on postpartum, etc., what's the process, the initial process of story sourcing? Is it something that comes from your initiative, something that you come across, something that you're interested, or to what extent is it influenced by what the readers want to read right now, or jumping off from fast news and then developing?
It's a mixture of those. So on features specifically, we do features that are related to breaking news. So that would be the examples that I gave you from Ukraine and Israel. Those were feature stories. For instance, the one about the Zaka body collectors. That was a story about them. That had very little breaking news reporting in it, but it was related to it, so that came from it. So we do have, we of course have people who watch what people are searching for, what are the trending topics, and things like that. So some ideas come from that. The postpartum depression story in particular came to be because I heard about the guy doing the run, and I was interested in it. And I started talking to someone who knew him, and started talking to him, and I was I knew that to make the story work, he needs to be on board, and he needs to, I needed him to want to share the story, because it's such a tragic story that is so personal to him. So it took a long time to get that story reported, because I had several phone calls with him, including one with the person we had in common, where she sort of introduced us, and you have to build up the trust, and then we had several interviews with him, and we worked on how best to tell the story, and it sort of all at the end kind of came together in the way it did. But that story was something I really wanted to do, and thankfully my editors were on board immediately. Sometimes I come up with a story and I have to really push to have it happen. Sometimes I come up with stories and my editor's like, not sure, but this one was something that people were interested in, so we went ahead. But it's a mixture of the ideas come from all sides, and yeah. Thank you.
I guess it would be appropriate to ask the last questions. Any advice or recommendation if someone would like to pursue a professional career being a journalist like you? As we have a number of students or just
I'd say
getting out
don't
of
give
the
up.
school.
Really, don't give up. There's going to be so many people telling you that you can't do it, or it's stupid, or that journalism is dying and will be replaced by AI. If you want to do it, do it. And I'm the best example of I was rejected so many times. Like I was making little notes about all the rejections, and it didn't happen. So just believe that it will, and will. And pick the right parents, of course.
Do you have?
Maybe I would add 2 points. Just find an understanding and tolerant partner for your life if you are a journalist. Otherwise, you can get in troubles.
I wholeheartedly agree with this. My partner is a saint.
So you're lucky on all front, and we are lucky that we had you here. So will you please join me in the round of applause for this very insightful, I guess also witty and inspirational comments and discussions. Thank you all for joining us. I think we can carry on with more informally over the drinks next door. And also, if you're interested, you're certainly welcome to join us. I believe it's 4 weeks from now. We're going to continue with the series. Our guest will be Lady Milena Grenfell-Baines. Some of you might recognize the name. She was one of the Nicholas Vinton children, so to speak, with the kindred transport coming to these countries many years ago. And I'm sure it's going to be a very fascinating evening as well. So thank you.